Hello and welcome to our podcast, Helen Midgley.
Hello, thank you. Very happy to be here. Welcome.
So you are very kindly here to talk to us about mediation because of Family Mediation Week. So could you introduce yourself to our listeners, please?
Of course, yes. So I'm Helen Midgley. I'm a partner at Tees. I'm a family law specialist, and I am an accredited family mediator and a resolution together practitioner.
Fantastic. So very important question because we are talks with teas.
Yes.
So have you got your tea?
I have my tea, yes.
You're humble and you drink tea.
Well, water is absolutely fine. Just because I don't like tea.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Okay, so could you give us one fun fact for our listeners, please?
No, I'm happy to be embarrassed that I regularly participate in a local dramatics group, and I am starring in panto, often as the back end of a horse or cat on occasion.
Fantastic. Yes, that is a fun fact.
The fun fact,
Okay, brilliant. On it. Great.
So, in preparation for our mediation week, which we believe is the 27th of January.
kick off 27th.
27th of January, yes, excellent. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about why you became a mediator?
Oh, good question. What I love about family law is getting to hear people's stories and trying to be really practical and helping them sort things out. And one of the drawbacks of the sort of traditional solicitor route, which I do, enjoy and value, is it's quite time consuming. The nice thing about being mediator is you're hearing from both participants, both sides of the family, and you're doing that in real time. So it can be a really effective way of talking. And so that's what appeals to me, is that you're helping people there and then in real time.
Excellent. I suppose from our point of view as well, and for our listeners, what actually is mediation? And how does it kind of play within the family law field?
Yeah, no, good question. So family mediation is basically a process. It's an approach to resolving disputes where you quite often sit in a room like this, or on sofas or around a table, but you're either couple or ex-couple will be there, we call them the participants, with a mediator who is a neutral third party. The mediator isn't allowed to give any legal advice, so when I'm mediating, I'm not there as a solicitor, I'm there as a mediator. Talk about having different hats. And so with my mediator hat on, I'm there to facilitate the discussion. That could be as simple as sort of just literally providing the room, hosting people, making sure that they're comfortable and are in an environment where they can talk. Or it could be suggesting ideas. Have you thought about this? Or what is the most important thing? And we try and do it in a really balanced way. So you're mediator, because they're neutral, our responsibility is to be even-handed. So it's not just about asking what dad thinks, it's asking what mum thinks, and possibly asking dad, what do you think mum thinks? And mum, what do you think dad thinks? And through the process of exploring what people are concerned about or what their priorities are, you often find areas of agreement and commonality, and as a consequence of that, ideally, you reach a consensus, and the couple are reaching a consensus, the family is reaching a consensus, which ideally they can go ahead and make into a concluded agreement.
Okay, so I think it would be helpful if we talk about some key principles. So a lot of our clients have, understandably, concerns about confidentiality. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's a good concern to have, because we're talking about lots of issues, whether it's finances, whether it's child arrangements, whether it's, just people's feelings. Actually, it's private. And so mediation, the process itself is confidential. If there were maybe a safeguarding issue, that sometimes is a reason to break that confidence. But I'm very happy today. I'd only, in the time I've been mediating, been required to do that maybe I think once, and that was actually worked out wonderfully. Parents were happy to do that because they ended up getting some support from the local authority, so it actually worked out really well. So the process itself is confidential, and the other side of the confidential nature is a boring legal term, without prejudice. So mediation is a privileged negotiation. So everything that's discussed in the mediation is kept between the three participants, the two and the mediator, and any others who are in the room. And so that is quite helpful because it gives people that opportunity to talk or to road test ideas that they wouldn't necessarily want to be bound to until they've explored it fully. So, what would it work out if it was actually Sunday night as well? Well, let's have a think about whether that would work. Or would it work if we didn't sell the house? What would that look like in practice? And sometimes people don't want to commit on paper in an open way that idea. But the nice thing about mediation is you have that environment where you can sense check and road test ideas.
Also, just adding on to that, I mean, some of our listeners will be a little bit concerned if they're from a relationship which is, being quite, abusive or controlling, and they wouldn't want to be in the same room as their other spouse. Is there any way mediation can still work, or how would someone be put off from mediation if that was an issue?
I would say mediators have a responsibility, and they've stolen it from the medical community. First, do no harm. So one of the things that we mediators have a responsibility to do is listen out for, is there a suggestion of abuse, or is there a suggestion of manipulation, or not necessarily in those harsh terms, but just power imbalance. Something that would make it unlikely that these two people will be able to have an effective discussion. Because and I quite often say this to participants, if you're sitting in the room thinking, I will agree to anything just so I can leave this room, that's not a good environment to be in. So because of that, what mediators do, family mediation process requires, it's called a MIAM, and which stands for Mediation, Information and Assessment Meeting.
Yes.
Because that's a mouthful, we just say MIAM. Yes, much easier. So in that MIAM, which is an individual meeting, the mediator is listening out for all kind of signs to assess the suitability of that family situation for mediation, and mediation for that family. And one of the things always we're looking out for is risk of domestic abuse or other kind of violence or manipulation and coercion and those sorts of things. And if it's going to be so difficult and potentially dangerous,
what would happen in that scenario? What would happen next? So I suppose sometimes I think it'd be helpful for clients if they can really picture what's going on. So yeah, is this a phone call? Are they in person? And then what's happening after that?
Mm-hmm. So the MIAM, first of all, the way I always do a MIAM, I never double book MIAMs. So I don't ever want a client to think that their ex might be sat in the waiting room for them to walk out, because I don't know what's going on in their lives yet. I don't know almost anything about them really. So that MIAM, usually 45 minutes, an hour and a half if it needs to be. So we're having a discussion in a private arena. As I said, it's confidential unless there's a safeguarding issue. And that can be physically in person, so people come into the office, or sometimes use the delights of video conferencing, Zoom or Teams or whatnot. It's not generally, MIAM isn't generally done on telephone, because one of the things that mediators are looking out for is body language, that's it. And that's, you pick up so much just by getting the sense of people, so a telephone call would probably be sufficient. So the MIAM itself, I always like to think of it as it's a cuppa and a natter, and that shouldn't be stressful. You're coming in for say an hour. You make sure everyone has a cup of tea, because we're at tea, so we love tea, and also it's an opportunity to explain what's going on in your world. Some mediators will ask lots of questions. Some will just let the participant start talking. Sometimes it's a balance. It depends what they need. Some people are quite shy. Some people have a lot to say. It's a real balance. And then at the end of that that assessment, what normally happens is that the other participant or potential participant will be invited. Can't force anyone into mediation. That's one of the other principles I should have mentioned before. It's a voluntary process. Nobody can be forced to mediate. It's entirely contrary to the whole principle of family mediation. And quite often at the end of that second MIAM, I'll say to participants, well, I need a little bit of time to reflect.
Yes.
It may be, if there are things that would suggest a power imbalance that might make it not constructive, and I need to think, how can I make this safe? How can I make this helpful? Now, that could be that we think about being in separate rooms, and if needs be, we time arrivals and departures so they're staggered, so people aren't crossing over. Or it could be that we are having online discussions, so people are, for example, if someone's got a disability, they might need to, it might not be easy for them to come in, for example, so we can make allowances for that. I've had a case before where we needed a translator to come along to the mediation process. So all of those sort of formalities and logistics need to be thought about.
Yeah.
But if it seems like it's going to be suitable, and I would say that assessment process doesn't just happen as a tick box exercise at the beginning. Mediators are always listening out for whether or not mediation is going to continue to be safe. But if all looks good, then I would invite both participants to schedule a first joint meeting.
Okay, so I think that brings us swiftly into non-court dispute resolution as a general principle.
Yeah.
So obviously you are our big advocate for non-court dispute resolution in the team.
Our teams, with all of our family lawyers are resolution members, so we adhere to code of conduct. One of the important things about that is that we should avoid inflammatory language, and we work together, and we're trying to remind our clients that the children didn't choose this.
Yes, I mean we spoke about that in our first session actually, that very much if we can try and steer away from this litigation, try and make it as easy as possible for the children, especially.
Yeah.
I think just to kind of round up and conclude matters, some practical tips for families considering mediation. Just if your bullet point 3 practical tips you would say
Very good.
for families considering mediation, perhaps in the new year, having had our divorce day.
Rather than tips and / advice and things, number one, don't be intimidated by it. It is voluntary. You can't be forced into it. Now, sometimes people say that, well, the court's told me I have to do this, which education is key at all levels, but the courts are encouraging people to try it. But try not to be intimidated, because the mediator, particularly when they are properly trained, will be doing their very best to make sure it's a safe and constructive environment. What else? Well, practical tips.
I said you see it as more like a cuffer in a chat.
I shouldn't. Yes, I'm probably doing myself a disservice. It is still an important process, but and I think sometimes I find clients come in and they're like, oh, I'm in a law firm. This is really intimidating.
I know. Especially as so many people, when they come to see a mediator, family lawyers, they had never seen a lawyer before, have they? They've never set foot into a law firm. So I think, perhaps not for everybody, but I think the fact that it is a more relaxed environment in that initial mediation.
It can be. I'm not saying it's without its stresses, but
Of course, but yes, that you do your best to. Obviously, there's going to be challenges there, but yeah.
Agreed. I'm trying to think of 2 others. What practical tips? Well, other things to bear in mind. The nice thing about mediation is you don't need to necessarily be an expert. So one of the brilliant things about family mediation is you can bring in experts into the process. So quite often we might have a financial neutral, which is either, say, a tax advisor or a financial advisor or a pension specialist, someone who can give us a steer. So because people are allowed to have their own lawyers alongside the mediation process, that independent legal advice is something mediators will say repeat, you are entitled to independent legal advice. But at the same time, some people don't want to do that. They don't want to necessarily pay for a solicitor and a mediator at the same time. It's a matter of choice. But that doesn't mean you then have to know everything. The mediator is allowed to provide legal information and can signpost to other services or other specialists, counsellors, family therapists, financial advisors, etc. So you won't have to know everything. So don't be intimidated. Don't think you need to be an expert. And the other top tip is listen. I think because I'm always surprised by how often two people in a family are saying the same thing in a different way. They are. I'm generalizing, but I feel confident in my generalization here that at the end of the day, people absolutely love their children, and that is really fundamental to what they're about. And yes, okay, money is important, and no one's pretending it isn't, but more often it's people are afraid. That it's the uncertainty. I don't know how I'm going to afford it, or I don't know what my life's going to look like, or I've never dealt with money before. So sometimes all of that together, but those two things, that people love their children and are afraid by change. And because of that, tensions spiral under control. But actually, quite often they're saying the same thing in a different way. That's a really good way of summarising.
Thank you so much.
Good.
It's been very insightful.
So, yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed it.